The swing on Elm Street had a particular creak. Second board from the left, where the wood had softened. My grandmother, Lillian, said it was the house breathing. Every spring, she'd go at it with a bar of soap, rubbing it into the hinges until the sound stopped. By October, it was always back. A low, rhythmic groan whenever the wind shifted. That's what I thought of in the dark, the sound of the house breathing. Other sounds came in pieces. A rhythmic beep, not like the swing, but like something counting. A whisper of rubber soles on linoleum. The smell of antiseptic, sharp and clean, erasing the smell of lavender that always clung to Lillian's curtains. I couldn't open my eyes. I tried. The command would go from my brain to my eyelids and just stop. Like a message sent to an address where no one was home. But I could hear, and I could feel. The cotton sheet pulled tight over my chest. The cool, dry air on my face. The slight pinch of a cannula in my nostrils. And the voices, two of them, one I knew, one I didn't. Neurological function is clearly diminished. The swelling isn't receding as we'd hoped. That was the unknown voice. Male, professional, tired. My mother's voice, when it came, was thin. So what does that mean exactly? It means, Mrs. Walsh, that we're at a crossroads. The ventilator is doing the work. But if we're looking at a long-term, persistent vegetative state, we have to consider the patient's quality of life and the family's wishes. The word patient landed on me like a cold coin on my chest. I was a patient. I was a diminished neurological function. Your husband mentioned a living will, the doctor said, an advance directive. A pause. I could picture my mother's face. The way she'd pull her lips into a thin line when she was thinking, the skin around her mouth going white. We have it, she said. He brought it. And it's clear. In the event of a catastrophic brain injury with no reasonable expectation of recovery, her wish is for a DNR. Do not resuscitate, and the removal of life-sustaining treatment. My heart, which I hadn't been able to feel, gave a hard, sudden thump against my ribs. The monitor beeped faster for a second, then steadied. No one noticed. Do not resuscitate. The words were clear. I'd seen them on charts 100 times. I was an ICU nurse. I'd had the conversations with families. I'd held their hands. I'd explained what it meant. We will not shock your heart. We will not put a tube down your throat. We will let you go peacefully. I'd always thought it was a kindness, a good plan, a way to die with dignity. I never thought about what it felt like to be on the other side of the words, to be the one they were deciding to let go. My mother's voice, smaller now. And you think that's where we are? A long, terrible pause. I waited for the doctor's answer. I waited for my father to speak. He hadn't said a word. The MRI is not promising, the doctor said gently. We can wait another 48 hours, see if the swelling goes down, but I want you to be prepared. You have a difficult decision to make. And having that document, it's a gift in a way. It's her telling you what she would have wanted. What I would have wanted. I'd signed that thing 5 years ago at a health fair at the hospital, sitting at a folding table between a booth selling discounted gym memberships and one giving out free blood pressure checks. I'd scribbled my name, barely reading the fine print, thinking it was the responsible, adult thing to do. I never thought my father would hold it in his hand and use it to silence my mother. We'll reconvene in the morning, the doctor said. Get some rest. Footsteps. A door opening, a swish of air and closing, then just my mother. A soft, muffled sound, crying into her hands or a tissue. It was a private sound, one I wasn't meant to hear. Then my father. His voice was different. Not the authoritative tone he used at the dinner table, not the jovial laugh he used with clients. This was flat, hollow. Eleanor, stop that. Crying won't help. I'm her mother, Gerald. I can cry, a chair scraped. The document is clear. We have to be practical. Think about the cost, the toll this takes on us, on her. It's what she wanted. I wanted to scream. I'm right here. I can hear you. My foot itches. I don't want to die, but my body was a tomb. I was a ghost in the machine, listening to my own wake. My mother's crying subsided. 48 hours, she whispered. We'll see, my father said, but it wasn't a promise. It was a dismissal. Another sound, the soft creak of a door. Then just the beeping of the monitor counting out the seconds of my life. I was alone. I thought of the swing, the second board from the left, the house breathing. and for the first time, I was terrified of the silence that would come when they decided to stop the machine and let the house fall still. I fought then. I fought with everything I had. I tried to move a finger, a toe. I tried to force my eyes open. I strained against the weight of my own body, against the darkness pressing in on me. It was like trying to lift a mountain. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. The beeping continued, steady and indifferent. I don't know how long I fought. Time wasn't a river anymore, it was a still, deep lake. I sank into it, exhausted, and the last thing I heard before the darkness took me under was that beep. Counting, waiting, and then nothing at all. The first thing I ever remember wanting, really wanting, was a pair of sneakers. Not the sturdy brown Oxfords my mother bought me every August, the ones that had to last the whole school year, the ones with the hard soles that clicked on the pavement like hooves. I wanted the white Keds with the blue stripe, the ones Debbie Marshall wore. They looked like you could run in them, like you could fly. I was 7. We were at Goldman's department store downtown. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered, making everyone look slightly sick. My mother was holding up a brown Oxford, turning it over in her hands, checking the stitching. "These are quality," she said. "They'll last." "I don't want quality," I said, and my own voice surprised me. It was loud. It echoed off the glass counters. "I want the white ones, the Keds." My mother's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with a warning. My father was over by the men's section, but he heard. He always heard. He walked over, slow and deliberate. He wasn't a tall man, but he had a way of making himself the center of any room. He looked down at me, then at the brown Oxfords, then at the white Keds on a display. "What did you say, Wendy?" I'd like the white ones, please." He crouched down so his face was level with mine. He smelled of aftershave and the mints he sucked on after lunch. His eyes were pale blue and very still. "Let me tell you something," he said, his voice quiet for me alone. "There are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who buy what they need and those who buy what they want. We are the first kind. We are practical. We don't waste money on a name or a stripe. We buy the shoe that will last. Do you understand?" I nodded, my eyes stinging. "And when you get your allowance," he continued, "you can put it toward things you want. But you'll find that by the time you save enough for the white ones, you'll need a new pair of the brown ones. That's the way it works." He stood up and patted my head. "She'll take the brown ones, Aliner." My mother handed them to the clerk without a word. She didn't look at me. That night I sat on my bed, holding the shoebox. I opened it and looked at the brown Oxfords, sitting there like 2 dutiful, ugly little soldiers. I hated them, but I also understood. There was a ledger, and on one side was what you wanted. On the other side was what you were allowed. My father kept the ledger, and I was already in debt. Years passed. The ledger grew. In high school, when I wanted to go to the lake with my friends, my father would ask, "Did you finish your chores?" If I had, the answer was still often, "We can't afford the gas." The cost of a single trip was tallied against the cost of my orthodontist appointment or the new tires for the car. When I got a scholarship to nursing school, a partial one, he sat me down. "This is a good, practical choice, Wendy. You'll always have work. It's a noble profession." He never asked if I wanted to be a nurse. It was simply accepted. It was on the need side of the ledger. The only place the ledger didn't exist was with my grandmother. Lillian's house on Elm Street was a different world. The porch swing creaked, the lavender grew wild by the side steps, and the tea she made was always just a little too sweet. "Why so much sugar, Grandma?" I'd ask, sitting on a stool in her tiny kitchen. "Because it's Tuesday," she'd say, as if that explained everything. And it did. In her world, there didn't have to be a reason. You could have sugar because it was Tuesday. I'd sit with her for hours, reading, or just watching the dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. She never asked me what I was going to do. She just seemed happy that I was. When she died, my freshman year of college, she left me the house. It was the only thing I'd ever been given, no strings, no ledger entry required. My father handled the paperwork. He was an accountant. It's what he did. "Good news," he said on the phone. "We're not going to have to sell it to cover the estate taxes. I've worked out a way to manage it. A little financial engineering. You just focus on your studies. I'll take care of the house." I was 20 years old, drowning in anatomy and physiology, grieving the only person who'd ever made me feel weightless. I was relieved. I didn't have to think about it. He would take care of it. And I thought that was love. I thought taking care of things for someone, managing their burdens, was how he showed it. I didn't see that he was just updating the ledger, transferring the debt. The house wasn't a gift, free and clear. It was an asset, and assets could be leveraged. I met Pat in my 3rd year of clinicals. She was in my rotation, 5 years older, divorced, with a sharp tongue and a louder laugh than anyone in my family had ever produced. We were assigned to clean a patient who'd had a bowel resection. It was a horrible, intimate, messy job. Halfway through, Pat looked at me, gloved hands covered in God knows what, and said, "Well, this beats retail." I laughed so hard I snorted. And just like that, I had a friend, a real one. Pat was the one who saw the holes in my story. She'd invite me for dinner and I'd say, "I can't, I have to save money." She'd say, "It's spaghetti, Wendy, it costs $2. Just bring the wine." She was the one who, after meeting my parents for the first time, sat in her car with me in the parking lot and said, "Okay, your mom is sweet in a totally dominated kind of way." "Your dad," she trailed off, searching for the right word. "What?" I asked, my stomach tight. "He asks a lot of questions, not how are you. Questions like, how much does your apartment cost? How much do you have in savings?" It's like he's auditing you. I brushed it off. "He's an accountant. It's how his brain works. He's just interested." Pat just looked at me, her head tilted. "Okay, honey, if you say so." She saw it. 18 years ago, she saw it. And I couldn't. Because I was still 7 years old in Goldman's, holding the brown Oxfords, believing that wanting the white ones was a character flaw. I believed in the ledger. I believed I was the debt. When I finally clawed my way back to the surface, it wasn't with a gasp or a grand awakening. It was like swimming up from a deep, dark lake. First, the pressure in my ears. Then, the light, a dull red glow through my eyelids. Then the sounds, the beeping but slower now, a hiss of oxygen, a distant voice over an intercom. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was white with tiny little bumps in the acoustic tile. I stared at it for a long time, just blinking. My mouth was dry like it was stuffed with cotton. My throat hurt. I tried to move my hand. It rose an inch and fell back on the bed. It felt like it weighed 100 pounds. A face appeared above me. A woman, maybe 60, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wasn't my mother. She wasn't anyone I knew. "Well, hello there, sleepyhead," she said, her voice soft. "Welcome back, I'm Deb. I've been sitting with you for a few days now." I tried to speak. It came out as a croak. "SHH, don't try to talk too much. You've got a tube down your throat for a while there. Here, just a little ice chip." She pressed a cold chip to my lips. It was the most glorious thing I'd ever tasted. I tried again. "Where my mom?" Deb's smile tightened just slightly, a micro-expression I'd been trained to read. "Your mom is in the waiting room, honey. She's been here every day. She just stepped out for a coffee. Your dad," she paused. "Well, he's been here too. They're both very worried." But I saw it. The hesitation on his name, the careful neutrality. Later, I learned the full calendar. I had been under for 11 days. The swelling in my brain had gone down on its own, a slow, stubborn retreat that the doctors called miraculous. I had a broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, and a deep, livid bruise across my chest from the seatbelt that had saved my life. The other driver, a kid who'd been texting, had walked away with a scratch. My mother came in, her face crumpling the moment she saw my open eyes. She cried and held my hand and smoothed my hair back from my forehead. My father came in, stood at the foot of the bed, and gave a short, tight nod. "Well," he said, "that's a relief." That was all. That was his contribution to my resurrection. They stayed for an hour, my mother doing all the talking, my father checking his watch. After they left, Deb came back in to adjust my IV. "You have a lot of questions," she said. It wasn't a question. "My dad, the DNR," I whispered. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me. "You heard that? Some of it." She sat down in the chair by the bed, the one my mother had just vacated. She folded her hands in her lap. "Then you know the position your mother was in, the position we were all in." "What happened?" After I heard that. Deb was quiet for a long moment. She was weighing something, loyalty to her patient, loyalty to the family, the truth. "Your mother," she finally said, "was a mess. Your father was very calm, very focused on the paperwork. He had the advance directive and he was clear. He wanted to honor your wishes. But I wasn't. I was getting better. We didn't know that. The MRI was bad. The numbers were bad. The doctors gave us a timeline. They were going to have that conversation with your parents again the next morning about removing life support. My blood ran cold. And my father, he was ready to sign. He had the pen in his pocket. She looked at me, her eyes direct. It was your mother who stopped it. She wasn't having it. She raised holy hell, pardon my French. She demanded a second opinion, then a third. She screamed at the head of the department. She said, "My daughter is a nurse, she's a fighter. And I am not signing a piece of paper that kills her because her father is too cheap to pay for the bed." My mother said that. My quiet, subdued, brown Oxford mother. "And Pat," Deb continued. "Your friend Pat. She came in off shift in her street clothes. She wasn't supposed to be here. She went to the nursing station and started making phone calls, calling in favors, getting a neurologist from the city to look at your scans remotely." She leaned forward. "And then there was something else, something that changed everything. Do you know a man named Kesler, from the bank?" I shook my head, confused. "He came to see your father right here in the waiting room. I was getting coffee. They didn't see me. Kesler was very polite, very professional. He said he was sorry to bother Mr. Walsh at such a difficult time, but there was a discrepancy with some paperwork regarding a property on Elm Street. He needed to clarify the signature on a recent loan application." I stared at her. "Elm Street? My grandmother's house? There's no loan. It's been paid off for 50 years. Deb just looked at me. The silence in the room was louder than the monitors. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying what I overheard, Wendy. I'm not making any accusations, but your father went white as a sheet. He excused himself and walked out of the waiting room with Kesler. They were gone for 20 minutes. When your father came back, he didn't say a word to your mother. He just picked up his coat and left. He didn't come back for 2 days. The ice chip in my mouth had melted, but my mouth was dry again, dry and sour. What happened to the meeting, the one where they were going to decide about me?" Deb's face softened. "It got postponed. Your mother raised such a stink, and then Pat's neurologist called in with a more hopeful assessment, and well, the doctors decided to wait. They gave it another 48 hours. By then, you started showing signs. A toe twitch, then a finger. You fought your way back before they could make the call. My mother fought for me. Pat fought for me. A stranger from a bank talking about my house had sent my father running. I closed my eyes. The dark behind my eyelids wasn't peaceful anymore. It was full of shapes I didn't recognize. A ledger with new, terrifying entries. A signature I didn't remember signing. And the sound of my father's hollow voice, talking about practicality, while I lay in a bed, waiting to be let go. The first time I saw Pat after I woke up, she didn't say a word. She just walked into my room, sat down in the chair, and burst into tears. Ugly, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I'd never seen her cry, not once in 18 years. I held out my hand. She grabbed it and held on like she was drowning. "You scared the hell out of me," she finally choked out. "I scare myself in the mornings," I whispered. My voice was still a wreck. "You should see my hair." She laughed, a wet, hiccuping sound, and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "It looks like a rat's nest. It's hideous. That's my girl." She stayed for an hour. We didn't talk about anything important. She told me about a new doctor on the floor who was a complete tool. I told her the hospital jello was an abomination against God and man. It was normal. It was us. It was a life raft. On Tuesday morning, 5 days after I'd woken up, my father came to see me. Alone. He walked in carrying a small bouquet of flowers, the kind you buy at a gas station. He set them on the bedside table. "You're looking better," he said. "I'm feeling better." A pause. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked around the room, at the machines, the IV pole, the get well card from Deb's unit tacked to a bulletin board. He looked everywhere but at me. "The doctor says you'll be able to go home in a week or so," he said. "You can stay with us while you recover. Your mother is already getting the guest room ready." That's kind of her. "And then, when you're back on your feet, you'll need to think about where to live. Your apartment, well, we gave it up. We didn't know how long you'd be." "In a coma," he flinched. In the hospital, we put your things in storage. The ledger. Cost-benefit analysis of paying rent on an empty apartment. Of course. I'll figure it out, I said. He finally looked at me. His eyes were the same pale, still blue. Wendy, I know things were confusing before. With the DNR, your mother was very emotional. I was just trying to do what you would have wanted. Based on a piece of paper I signed at a health fair 5 years ago. It's a legal document. It's what you wanted. Did you want it, Dad? The question hung in the air. He didn't answer. He just looked at me, and for a second I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, not sadness, something closer to annoyance, like I wasn't following the script. Your mother, he said, changing tack. She's been through a lot. We both have. We don't need to rehash all of that. The important thing is you're okay. Is the house okay, Dad? The change was immediate. A muscle in his jaw jumped. He went very still. What do you mean? I mean the house on Elm Street, my house. Is it okay? It's fine, it's just sitting there. I've been keeping up with the taxes, the maintenance, like I always have. No mortgage. No loans. The silence stretched. He stared at me and I stared back. I saw him calculating. How much did I know? Who had talked? What could he say? I have no idea what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost its authoritative tone. It was thinner, defensive. I think you do, I said. I think a man named Kesler from the bank came to see you, in this very hospital. While I was lying in a coma, you were having a meeting about a loan on my house. He took a step back as if I'd pushed him. His mouth opened, then closed. Who told you that? It doesn't matter, is it true? He recovered. I watched him do it. He pulled himself up, straightened his shoulders, and his face smoothed out into an expression of weary patience. It was the face he used with difficult clients. Wendy, you've been very sick. You've had a traumatic injury. You're not thinking clearly. There are financial matters, complexities that you don't understand. I have always handled the finances. For you, for your mother, for the whole family. It's what I do. It's how I show I care. You think you can just wake up from a coma and suddenly understand 30 years of financial planning. I understand a forged signature, I said quietly. I understand a $280,000 mortgage on a house that was paid off. His face went slack. The mask dropped for just a second and I saw something underneath. Not guilt, not shame, panic, pure animal panic. Then it was gone and the mask was back, but I had seen it. I had seen the truth. I'm not going to discuss this with you while you're in this condition, he said. When you're better, we can sit down with a financial advisor and I can explain the decisions that were made. They were made for your own good, to protect your assets. By putting them in your name, by managing them responsibly. He straightened his tie. I'll come back when you're more yourself. He left. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look back. The door swung shut behind him, and I was alone with the beeping of the monitors and the cold, hard certainty that my father had stolen my house. I was discharged on a Thursday. My mother drove me to their house in her old Honda. The Colonial on Fairfield Avenue looked the same as it always had. Manicured lawn, white columns, a flagstone walkway. It had never felt like home, but now it felt like enemy territory. My mother fussed over me for 2 days, made me soup, fluffed my pillows, tiptoed around like I was made of glass. She didn't mention the house or the DNR or my father. Neither did I. We existed in a strange, suspended silence, waiting for something to break it. My father was gone most of the time. At the office, he said, dealing with the backlog from being away during my situation. I didn't believe him. I spent my days on the couch, staring at my phone, waiting for Pat to call with news. She'd promised to look into the deed, the mortgage, the whole mess. On Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Not Pat. A text from an unknown number. Miss Walsh, this is Mark Kesler from Fairfield County Bank. I'm sorry to bother you during your recovery, but I have some documents I need to discuss with you regarding the Elm Street property. It's urgent. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I called him back immediately. Miss Walsh, he said, his voice professional but kind. Thank you for calling. I want to start by saying how sorry I am to hear about your accident. I hope you're recovering well. I'm recovering, I said. What's this about? A pause. Miss Walsh, there's no easy way to say this. 3 months ago, a mortgage was taken out on the Elm Street property in your name. $280,000. The signatures on the document are yours, but, well, given that you were in a coma at the time the paperwork was processed, I have some concerns about their validity." The world tilted. I gripped the phone. "A mortgage in my name. For what?" The stated purpose was home equity withdrawal. The funds were dispersed to an account jointly held by you and Gerald Walsh. My father, of course. "I didn't sign anything," I said. "I was unconscious. I was on a ventilator." "I'm aware, Miss Walsh. The date on the document is during your hospitalization. I've already flagged the file for our fraud department. We're conducting an internal investigation. I'll need you to come in and sign an affidavit when you're able." "I'll be there Monday." "That would be helpful. And Miss Walsh, I'm very sorry. This must be difficult." I hung up and sat in the silence of my mother's living room. Difficult. That was one word for it. Another word was theft. Another word was betrayal. Another word was my father trying to profit from my near-death experience. Pat showed up at the house an hour later. She didn't call first, just rang the doorbell. My mother answered, looking confused. "I'm Pat," she said, brushing past her. "Wendy's friend. We need to talk." She found me in the living room, still holding my phone. She took one look at my face and sat down on the coffee table in front of me. "You know," she said, it wasn't a question. "Kesler called the bank. There's a mortgage, $280,000. He signed my name while I was in a coma." Pat's jaw tightened. "I know, I've been digging. Wendy, it's worse than that." "Worse? How could it be worse?" She pulled out her phone and scrolled through screenshots. "The mortgage is one thing, but I also found this, a life insurance policy, taken out on you 5 years ago, right after you became a nurse. $2 million. Your father is the sole beneficiary." I stared at her. "Life insurance? I don't have life insurance. I never signed up for life insurance." "It's in your name. Premiums paid annually from an account your father controls." She looked at me, her eyes hard. "Wendy, if you had died, he would have collected $2 million. Tax-free." The room felt very cold. I thought about the DNR. I thought about how ready he had been to sign it. I thought about his hollow voice in the dark, talking about practicality and cost. I thought about the $280,000 mortgage, about the house. "He wasn't trying to let me go," I whispered. "He was trying to cash in." Pat didn't say anything. She didn't have to. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, running the numbers in my head. $2 million from the life insurance. $280,000 from the mortgage. The house itself, worth maybe $400,000. My father had tried to turn my death into a payday. And when that failed, he'd started cashing in on my life. I thought about the ledger. All those years of being told I was a debt, a burden, a cost to be managed. I thought about the Brown Oxfords and the canceled trips and the scholarships I'd had to fight for. I thought about my grandmother's house, the only place I'd ever felt safe, being used as collateral for my father's greed. And I thought about the fellowship hall at the First Presbyterian Church, the one my parents attended every Sunday, the one where my father served as an elder, the one where the whole congregation would gather for coffee hour after the service. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I got dressed in my best clothes. A simple navy dress, the one I'd worn to Lillian's funeral. I put on my grandmother's pearl earrings. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I didn't quite recognize. Someone harder, someone clearer. My mother was in the kitchen. "You're up early. Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. I need to borrow your car." "Where are you going?" "To church." Her face brightened. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. Your father will be so pleased." I didn't correct her. The First Presbyterian Church was a stone building on the town green, all gray granite and stained glass. I'd been dragged there every Sunday as a child, had sat in the hard wooden pews and listened to sermons about forgiveness and grace while my sister whispered insults in my ear. I hadn't been back in years. I parked the car and walked up the stone steps. The service was just letting out. The big oak doors swung open, and the congregation began to spill out into the autumn sunshine. Familiar faces. People who had known me since I was a child. People who had watched my father build his reputation as a pious, generous man. I stood at the bottom of the steps and waited. My father was one of the last to emerge. He was talking to Pastor Mitchell, shaking hands, smiling that practiced smile. When he saw me, the smile froze. Then it shifted into something concerned, paternal. "Wendy," he said, coming down the steps toward me. "You're out of the hospital. You should be resting." "I'm not here to rest, Dad. I'm here to talk." Pastor Mitchell had followed him down, so had a handful of other congregants. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face uncertain. "Talk," my father's voice was smooth. "Of course, we can talk at home. Let's get you back to the house." "No," I didn't raise my voice, but it carried. "We're going to talk here." A small crowd was gathering. People who had known the Evans family for decades. People who had sat in pews with us. People who thought they knew who we were. My father's eyes flicked left and right, assessing the audience. "Wendy, this isn't the place. You're still recovering. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in my entire life." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, the one Pat had given me. "I want to tell these people what you did." "What I did? I saved your life. I paid your medical bills. You signed a DNR. You were ready to let me die." A murmur ran through the crowd. My father's face reddened. "That's a gross misrepresentation. It was what you wanted. It was in your living will." "I signed that at a health fair, Dad. I was 25. It was a checkbox on a form." I pulled out the first document. "But this isn't a checkbox. This is a mortgage on Grandma Lillian's house. Signed in my name, dated while I was in a coma." Pastor Mitchell stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Gerald, what is she talking about?" My father's jaw worked. "She's confused. She had a traumatic brain injury. The doctors said I was dying," I cut in. "You were ready to believe them when it meant you could collect." I pulled out the second document. $2 million. That's what this life insurance policy is worth. The one you took out on me 5 years ago. The one where you're the sole beneficiary. The murmur grew louder. People were staring at my father with expressions I had never seen on their faces before. Doubt, suspicion, disgust. "That's enough." My father's voice was sharp now, the mask slipping. "You're making a scene. You're embarrassing yourself and this family." "I'm not embarrassing anyone. I'm telling the truth." I turned to the crowd. "My father has spent my entire life telling me I was a burden, a cost, a debt. He kept a ledger and I was always in the red. And when I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to speak or move, he tried to cash in. He tried to turn my death into a profit." My mother had come down the steps. She was standing at the edge of the crowd, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She didn't say a word. "This mortgage," I held up the paper, "is for $280,000. The money was deposited into an account with my father's name on it. The life insurance is for $2 million. If I had died, he would have collected every penny." I looked at him. "You didn't want to let me go, Dad. You wanted to sell me." The silence was absolute. 100 people stood on the church lawn, frozen in place. My father's face had gone white. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "I'm not pressing charges," I said, my voice steady. "Not yet. But I want something from you. I want you to sign over the deed to Elm Street. I want you to cancel the mortgage and pay back every dollar you took. And I want you to stay away from me for the rest of your life." He stared at me. For a long moment, I thought he might refuse. I thought he might fight. But then something in his face crumbled. Not remorse, not shame, just the collapse of a structure that had finally been exposed. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers," he said. His voice was hollow. Empty, I nodded. Then I turned and walked away. Through the crowd of silent, staring faces. Past my weeping mother. Past the stone church where I had learned about a God who was supposed to love me. I walked to my mother's car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look back. 3 days later, I moved into my grandmother's house on Elm Street. The deed was in my name. The mortgage had been canceled. My father had transferred the stolen money back into an account I controlled. He had done it all without a fight, without a word of apology, without even looking me in the eye. His lawyer handled everything. My father never called, never came by, never tried to explain. I didn't care. I was home. The house smelled like lavender and old wood. The porch swing still creaked when the wind shifted. I spent my first week there cleaning, sorting, remembering. I found my grandmother's recipe box in the kitchen, her handwriting on yellowed cards. I found her gardening gloves in the mudroom, still caked with dried soil. I found a photograph of her and me on the porch, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember. I put the photo on the mantel. I put her gloves on the shelf by the door. I made tea in her kettle, using her cups, and sat on the swing for hours, just watching the leaves turn. Pat came to visit on Saturday. She brought a bottle of wine and a bag of groceries and a fierce, protective smile. "How are you holding up?" she asked, settling into the rocking chair on the porch. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell me this was all a mistake and I have to go back. No one's going to tell you that. You're free." She looked at the house, at the yard, at the swing. "This is yours now, all of it." "I know." I took a breath. "I got a letter from Kesler. The bank is pressing charges. Forgery, fraud, the whole thing. They're not just canceling the mortgage, they're prosecuting." Pat's eyebrows went up. "Against your father and whoever helped him at the bank. Apparently, the notary on the document was a friend of his. She's already confessed to notarizing a signature without a witness." I thought about that. My father, so confident, so careful, undone by a notary who couldn't keep her mouth shut. Does he know? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. I looked out at the street, at the golden light filtering through the maples. My mother called. She's a mess. She keeps apologizing for things she didn't do, for not seeing, for not stopping him. Can you forgive her? I don't know that either. I took a sip of wine. She was as much a victim as I was, maybe more. She has to live with him. Pat was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "There's something else. Something I found when I was digging." I looked at her. "It's about the night of your accident, the phone records." She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a screenshot. "At 10:02 p.m., the night you were admitted, your father made a call. It lasted 4 minutes. Do you want to know who he called?" I did and I didn't. "Who?" "An insurance agent, the one who sold him the life insurance policy." She looked at me, her eyes soft. "He called to check on the claim process, to ask about the waiting period, to make sure the policy was active." I set my wineglass down. My hands were shaking. "He called before the doctors even knew if I would live. Before they'd done the MRI, before they'd given a prognosis. He called to ask about cashing in." Pat nodded. "That's the kind of man he is." We sat in silence as the sun set. The porch swing creaked. The wind shifted. The house breathed around us. The call from Meredith came 2 weeks later. I was in the garden, pulling dead plants from my grandmother's flower beds when my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. "Hello, Heather." A pause. "It's Meredith." My half-sister. My father's daughter from his first marriage, the one who had always hovered on the edges of my childhood. Older than me by 5 years, she had left home when I was 12, moved to California, rarely called. We were strangers who shared a last name. "Meredith." I sat back on my heels. "This is unexpected." "I know, I'm sorry to call out of the blue." Another pause. "I heard what happened, with Dad, with the house, with everything. Word travels fast. Linda called me. She was hysterical, going on about how you destroyed the family, how Dad might go to prison, how Marcus is a wreck." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "She wanted me to talk to you, to make you see reason." "And are you going to?" "No," the word was firm. "I'm calling for a different reason. I'm calling to tell you that I know." I waited. "I know what he's like. I know what he did to his first family, to his second, to everyone who ever trusted him." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the years of pain underneath. "When I left home at 18, I didn't just leave. I ran. I ran because I couldn't watch him destroy my mother anymore. I ran because I knew if I stayed, he would destroy me too. I didn't know. No one knew. That was the point." She took a breath. "Heather, I'm not calling to ask you to forgive him. I'm not calling to defend him. I'm calling to tell you that what you did, standing up to him in front of all those people, it was brave. It was something I could never do." I didn't know what to say. I sat in the dirt, holding the phone, listening to the voice of a sister I had never really known. "I should have been there for you," Meredith continued. "I should have warned you. I should have told you what he was capable of, but I was too busy saving myself. I'm sorry." "Meredith, let me finish. I'm not asking for forgiveness either. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone." that there's someone in this family who understands. And if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'm here. I closed my eyes. The sun was warm on my face. The smell of lavender filled the air. Thank you, I said. That means more than you know. We talked for another hour. About her life in California, her work as a graphic designer, her quiet, careful existence far from our father's reach. About my nursing career, my grandmother's house, the life I was building. We talked like strangers at first, then like acquaintances, then like something approaching sisters. When we finally hung up, I sat in the garden and cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from the sudden, startling realization that I wasn't as alone as I had always believed. October came to Elm Street in a blaze of color. The maples turned red and gold. The oaks dropped acorns on the roof. The air grew crisp and clean, carrying the smell of wood smoke from neighbors' chimneys. I spent the month fixing up the house, painting the kitchen the pale yellow my grandmother had always wanted, repairing the porch swing's creaky board, not to silence it but to strengthen it. I wanted it to keep creaking. I wanted to hear the house breathe. Pat came over on Sundays. We'd make a pot of my grandmother's tea, too much sugar because it was Sunday, and sit on the porch and talk about nothing. Work, patience, the new doctor she was dating, the cat she'd adopted. Deb came to visit once, driving the 90 minutes from the hospital just to see the house. She walked through every room, touching things gently, like she was in a museum. Your grandmother had good taste, she said, looking at a watercolor of the Maine coast. This is lovely. She was the only one who ever believed in me. Deb nodded. I know the type, they're rare. You hold on to them. I showed her the garden, the lavender my grandmother had planted, the roses I was trying to revive. She told me about her own mother, long gone, who had taught her to garden. We sat on the porch and drank tea and watched the afternoon fade. Before she left, she hugged me tight. You're going to be okay, Wendy. You're stronger than you know. I'm learning that, I said. The first week of November, I got a letter, handwritten in my mother's careful script. Dear Wendy, I know you don't want to see me. I understand. I failed you in so many ways for so many years. I was weak when I should have been strong. I was silent when I should have spoken. I chose peace over justice, and I let you pay the price. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to tell you that I'm leaving your father. I've filed for divorce. I've moved into an apartment in town. It's small and plain, but it's mine. I'm finally seeing clearly, Wendy. I see the daughter I should have protected. I see the woman you've become without any help from me. And I am so, so proud of you. If you ever want to see me, I would be grateful. If you don't, I will understand. Either way, I want you to know that I love you. I always have. I was just too afraid to show it. Mom, I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it on the mantel, next to the photograph of me and my grandmother. I didn't call her. Not yet. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I kept it, like a seed, waiting to see if it would grow. On a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of October, I made tea. Not just any tea. The tea my grandmother had taught me to make. Loose leaf in a ceramic pot, steeped for exactly 4 minutes. 2 teaspoons of sugar because it was Tuesday, and because my grandmother had believed that was reason enough. I carried the cup to the porch and sat on the swing. The house was quiet behind me. The garden was tidy. The lavender had been cut back for winter, but its smell lingered in the air. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about work. I didn't replay the conversations with my father, the scenes at the hospital, the confrontation at the church. I just sat and swung and watched the leaves drift down from the maples. The swing creaked, second board from the left, the house breathing. I thought about my grandmother, sitting in the same spot, watching the same trees, feeling the same breeze. I thought about her hands, soft and reaching, the way my mother's hands had been before she got sick. I thought about the ledger my father had kept, and how I had believed in it for so long, how I had accepted my place in it as a debt I could never repay. I didn't believe it anymore. The tea was warm in my hands. The sugar was just right. The swing creaked, steady and familiar. And for the first time in my life, I sat in a place that was truly mine, and I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to take up space. My phone buzzed inside the house. I ignored it. The wind shifted. The swing creaked. I took another sip of tea.